On June 6 of 2018, I uploaded an analysis for the story Critical Hit. This was my 5th entry into the analysis series, and while it was a fine analysis for the time it came out, I am now sitting atop a pile of nearly 30 analysis videos. Since my Critical Hit analysis, I have learned and noticed so much more about this series, and as a result, I want to go back and retcon something I said in that analysis. The reason that the Critical Hit was so effective. In the original analysis, I chalked it up to Takagi being shocked that Nishikata would really choose her over his friends, and while I still think that's part of the reason, there is a much bigger aspect to consider. The reason the Critical Hit worked is that it was a seemingly huge leap forward for Nishikata that Takagi was not prepared for. I've said this a few times throughout my analysis series, and I'm going to say it again here. I view the show through a lens that Takagi's teasing serves 3 purposes. 1. For entertainment, a la pool. 2. To make Nishikata a better and stronger person, a la muscle training. And 3. To butter him up to be her romantic partner, a la every story I will be talking about throughout this video. Chronologically, we begin with First Day of School, the story where I believe Takagi first falls for Nishikata. His first real action towards her is to retrieve her missing handkerchief and to turn it into the staff room. When she reveals her identity to him, he has a huge reaction that gives her a great deal of entertainment. By the time Eraser rolls around, Takagi has a full-blown crush on Nishikata, and Nishikata has his own crush on her. But he isn't ready to admit that to himself yet. We know this because he isn't sure why he's disappointed in Eraser, and Takagi knows this too. You can argue that Takagi's master plan really begins around the time of Empty Can. At the beginning of this story, Nishikata is nervous about walking home with Takagi, and even checks to see if anyone is looking before doing so. When I initially watched Empty Can for the purpose of analysis, I had actually forgotten that walking home together was not always the status quo, given that so many of the show's stories happen during the walk home. Her plan here is to start off small. Just make walking home together mundane, which she eventually succeeds in. If we skip ahead a few episodes, the next major development occurs in Tandem Riding. Takagi is a little upset about starting summer break, given that she will not get to see Nishikata every day. As well as showing the audience that she does genuinely like hanging out with him, it also serves as one of the few conflicts that she has to overcome in the show. And she eventually does overcome this conflict by convincing Nishikata to practice tandem riding with her, which not only gives them a reason to meet up during summer, but also has them participating in the same activity. Another interesting point here is that Nishikata agrees to practice tandem riding with her, despite not really having a reason, further cluing us in that he enjoys spending time with her as well. Again, even though he's not ready to admit that to himself yet. Our next stop along the timeline is Water Tap. Water Tap is one of my favourite stories, and it tells us quite a bit, not just about Nishikata, but also about Takagi. Something I failed to realise before I released my Water Tap analysis is why Takagi splashes Nishikata with water while they are having a good moment. She manages to get his guard down and he is confiding in her, so why would she ruin that by throwing water on him? Well, to answer that, we need to revisit another point that has come up a few times throughout this analysis. The fact that Takagi is actually very emotionally fragile if you get to her in the right way. That way being intimacy. She understands this about herself, so she knows to take her plan slow, not just to avoid scaring Nishikata away, but also because if Nishikata outpaces her, it will leave her in a vulnerable position. So that is why she splashes him with water. The two of them are having a moment, and Takagi believes that if it goes on, it will go to a place that she is not ready for yet. So she slams on the brakes. We then make our way to Room. In Room, Nishikata has a very quick bout of character growth. At the start of the story, he is terrified about Takagi coming into his room, but by the end of the story, they've hung out all day, and when Takagi says that she will be back, Nishikata reacts by thinking to himself that he had better clean his room, telling the audience that having Takagi over is no longer something that makes him nervous. This is a big deal because a private bedroom is a serious space, especially to teenagers. So letting Takagi in and becoming more comfortable with the idea displays a great deal of earned trust. Next in line is Ribs. By this time, Takagi is taking steps towards normalizing more intimate things. In this story, she encourages Nishikata to poke her in the ribs, and when he loses a game, she makes poking her his punishment. Nishikata is nervous about this, but reluctantly goes through with it anyway. The aim of this interaction is the first step in normalizing physical contact. Nishikata admits that this is his first time touching her, so it is a pretty big step for him. But then we get to Invitation, a story where Takagi is explicitly asked if she is dating Nishikata. She decides to make Nishikata invite her to walk home this time, as she is always the one inviting him. but she thinks he is ready for this and she is right. Through nerves, he asks her to walk home with him, thus reaching a new milestone. Right after this in-choice question, Takagi is able to confirm that her plan is working just fine when Nishikata says that he would rather be teased forever than have Takagi disappear. Then, at long last, we get to critical hit. By this point in Takagi's plan, she has walking home together, hanging out outside of school, and going to Nishikata's house completely normalized, and she is just starting to normalize physical contact and having him take more initiative in their relationship. However, at this point their relationship is still in a very antagonistic place. He is still always coming up with plans to get back at her and always has his guard up. He still usually says that he hangs out with her so that he can get back at her. As far as Takagi can tell, she is still more of a rival or a foil to Nishikata than a potential love interest. Or so she thinks. The reason the critical hit works is because she is proven wrong. Nishikata goes into autopilot and Takagi is likely aware of this. He's in autopilot so that he can answer her while still thinking about how to get her back. And people speaking in autopilot usually don't have as many filters as they do when they're speaking normally. This makes them a little more truthful. And this turned out to be the case here. When asked if he's really okay with not playing the game, he tells her that he would rather walk home with her. Now, when I said that my original analysis still had a good point, this is what I mean. Yes, it is the fact that Nishikata would rather hang out with her other than go play video games with his friends, but what I failed to mention there is that he is not supposed to be at that point yet. At least that's what Takagi thinks. This gets to her because he is much further along than she thought he was and much further than she was ready for. Of course, he realizes what he has done and tries to take it back, but there is no taking it back. He said it and Takagi feels the full brunt of it. Nishikata's critical hit was ultimately being honest, even too honest for himself. Of course, this isn't the last piece of character development, but I will be talking about that in the next video. In the meantime, if you want to see the notes or outtakes for this video, you can see them on my website, links in the description. If you want to see the films that I write and direct, check out my parent channel, Big Joe Productions. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.